Good evening. My name is Marcel van Hemert, and I am here to present We the People, an essay on constitutional rights for minorities in 13 global constitutions. So my research question was, how does constitutional protection for minorities differ between the United States and other countries? So minorities are commonplace in today's society, and different governments have found different ways to protect them. And this essay is solely going to go over constitutional rights, the rights explicitly stated in the constitutions of 13 global nations. So the 13 countries that I chose were all world superpowers. The first was the United States, and they are traditional world superpower since their inception in 1776, as well as the country in which I'm basing my research off of in terms of comparisons. I've also chosen the BRICS nations. The BRICS nations are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and the Republic of South Africa. These nations are seen as economic superpowers, and they're upcoming. I've also chosen France and the United Kingdom, as they're the only two members of the United Nations Security Council remaining that are including Russia and China and the United States. Germany is the largest and most influential nation in the European Union. Canada and Australia are the largest and most influential nations outside of the United Kingdom in the Commonwealth realm. Mexico is the largest Spanish-speaking nation in the world, and Spanish is the third largest language in the world, spanning the entire Western Hemisphere. And I also selected Egypt, as they are a progressive superpower in the Arab world, and the Arab world includes North Africa and the Middle East, as well, and I have excluded Iran and Turkey. So, to start comparing constitutional rights, I first have to acknowledge the rights of the United States Constitution. First off, there are no immigrant rights specifically mentioned. There are no Native American rights specifically mentioned. There are women's rights, however. They are found in the 19th Amendment, giving women the power to vote. There are no LGBTQ+ rights, and I will go into the reason for that later. And the religious rights are found in the First Amendment in our list of freedoms. So, immigrant rights. Immigration has occurred since the dawn of humanity, and many constitutions have rights regardless of origin or parentage. However, I feel like rights for immigrants were most explicitly stated and most clearly stated in the constitutions of the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China. I have an excerpt here from the People's Republic of China Constitution, the Chinese Constitution. The state protects the lawful rights and interests of the minority nationalities and upholds and develops the relationship of equality, unity, and mutual assistance among all of Chinese nationalities. As you can see, the Constitution was written in 1982. So, rights for native peoples. Throughout history, all nations have marginalized native peoples and native lingual groups and lingual minorities. This can be found in Russ Reimer's Vanishing Voices. Vanishing Voices is the story of native peoples and their languages and how their languages are dying at a rapid rate. Canada, Egypt, Germany, the Republic of South Africa, and the United Kingdom all feature lingual minority rights, but Russia states it most explicitly, in which it says, "The Russian Federation shall guarantee all of its peoples the right to preserve their native language and create conditions for its study and development." In Item 3 of Article 68 of Chapter 3 of Section 1 by Alexeyev, Shakrov, and Sobchak. This is the post-Soviet Constitution, written in 1993. So, in terms of women's rights, there are more men than women in the world per the world sex ratio. But women's status up until the 19th century has made them a minority. From the Industrial Revolution to present day, women's status has improved to include equality in the workplace and giving women the right to vote. All 12 countries have now included rights for women in their constitutions, with the exception of one, and that is Australia. However, Australia does mention rights for women and for all other minorities in its guarantee of equality, which states, "A subject of the Queen, resident in any state, shall not be subject in any other state to disability or discrimination, which will not be equally applicable to him if he were subject of the Queen, resident in such another state," which was written in 1901. In terms of LGBTQ+ rights, the LGBTQ community is very recent, and so there is really no mention in any global constitution of their rights. However, in Mexican and South African constitutions, there are mentions of the LGBTQ rights, and they're the only two nations that I analyzed that featured LGBTQ plus rights. In the Mexican constitution, it says any form of discrimination based on ethnic or national origin, gender, age, disabilities, social status, medical conditions, religion, religious opinions, sexual orientation, marital status, or any other form which violates human dignity or seeks to annul or diminish the rights and freedoms of the people is prohibited, as well as in the South African Constitution, where it states that the state may not unfairly discriminate directly or indirectly against anyone on one or more grounds, including race, gender, sex, pregnancy, marital status, ethnic or social origin, color, sexual orientation, age, disability, religion, conscience, belief, culture, language, and birth. This comes from the Constitution of South Africa, written in 1996, and the Mexican Constitution was written in 1917. In terms of religious minorities and religious rights, 10 of the 13 nations have a religious minority section and protections, even if there is no state religion, as is the case with the Canadian Constitution, with the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which states, every individual is an equal before and under the law and has the right to equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination, and in particular without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, mental or physical disability, written in the Constitution Act of 1867. However, the United States does grant this right. It's one of the few rights that I analyzed that they do grant, and it's found in our First Amendment. So, time for my counter-arguments. My first counter-argument is that the United States does offer such rights that are detailed. And while this is a true and valid counter-argument, it should be noted that the U.S. Constitution doesn't feature these rights within their Constitution. Rather, they are found in separate acts and different articles elsewhere that are federal canon. I should also mention that the U.S. Constitution was written in 1787, which makes it much, much older than all but one of the constitutions that are being analyzed, and that is the Constitution of the United Kingdom. It's very old, and 17 of the 27 amendments were ratified after the original Constitution plus its original 10 amendments were ratified. A lot of these other constitutions were written in the 20th century, and being written in the 20th century, these constitutions are more responsive to minority rights. My second counter-argument is regarding Egypt and Australia. Egypt is Islamic, while Australia is not. So because of the restriction of Sharia law in Egypt, Australia is more free than Egypt. I should note that the same principle applies here. The Australian Constitution was written in 1901, while the Egyptian one was written in 2014. The Egyptian Constitution also came about after the overthrow of Mohammed Morsi in the Arab Spring. Also to be noted that not all of these rights are always enforced, but I'm not going to go over that, as there are extensive situations in which these rights aren't being enforced, and the essay doesn't address these instances because I'm only addressing the explicitly stated constitutional rights. So, in conclusion, minorities are inevitable in today's society, and most nations do acknowledge minorities, but not all give them rights in the same way. A majority of the world superpowers are in agreement as to what rights minorities have, however, and they are found in different places like legislative actions, case laws, and other governmental documents.
I had a couple of questions.
All right.
What evidence did you gather that you didn't use, and why did you choose not to use it?
Well, I gathered a lot of evidence about race relations in the constitutions, but I decided not to use it because I felt like it would be too much of an extensive topic to pour into, and it deserved its own special essay.
Okay. What advice would you have for other researchers who consider this topic?
Well, I would definitely recommend using services that help you to analyze the constitutions, because they can be very tedious to pore over pages upon pages of laws from different nations. And while it's very interesting, it's tough to do and it takes a lot of time. So I would definitely recommend using different softwares that will help you to analyze. However, I would also recommend taking into account some of the things that I took into account, such as the age of the Constitution and the religious beliefs of certain countries, I would also recommend you pouring into different constitutions, because again, I only sampled 13 of 193. There are so many more that I could have gone into, but I only went into 13, so I would highly recommend going into different ones that I picked, or the other ones that I picked to kind of test that out.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.